Welcome, everyone, to the future of space. Today, we have Dr. Scott Parazynski. He is a highly decorated physician, founder and CEO of Fluidity Technologies. He's a retired NASA astronaut. In fact, he was inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in 2016 and was Senator John Glenn's crewmate and personal physician. Scott has also climbed Everest. He dove to the Titanic. Charlie Duke, who's a Apollo 16 pilot and Apollo 11 Capcom, says that his book, The Sky Below, A True Story of Summits, Space, and Speed, is one of the best books he has read. Scott, welcome to the future of space.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you, Daniel. I'm thrilled to join you.
It's the second time that you and I we have a little interview. The first time was for the Proust Nature questionnaire. So
Right,
I'm
right.
glad to be catching up and reconnecting. Scott, I want to start with the usual questions that I ask my guests. Please give me 3 words to describe space. You've been to space, so 3 words.
Well, it's tough to encapsulate all that space is, but when I think deeply about space, I think of its majesty. So, majestic is something that certainly it stirs the soul. It's infinite, the infinite blackness of space. Looking back to the very beginnings of time, it's just awe-inspiring. And finally, I think about the collaboration, the collaborative nature of it. When we do incredibly challenging things like go to space, it's not a single person's effort, but it's an entire team of brilliant people from all over the world that need to come together to take on a challenge like this. So again, majestic, infinite, and collaborative.
Do you think that collaboration is gonna get diluted as more and more people get to space? And I guess at one point there's going to be this next impossible point that kind of calls for that collaboration. What do you think?
I don't think that space will be getting any easier, even though um, certainly SpaceX is starting to make it look that way. Every launch that leaves the surly bonds of Earth to get into space is doing something that's really daunting. And it will always be a team effort, whether that's among nations or just among highly functioning teams of a particular part of the world. But it will always be a team endeavor, never a solo that I can see. I thought you were going to ask me about just the new world order and how things have changed, of course, geopolitically with the former Soviet Union, maybe the rebirthing of the Soviet Union and what's happening in the Ukraine right now. I'm very concerned about the awful things that are happening in the Ukraine and to people that we know and care about over there. But I do think that space is a wonderful bridge between nations, and that was one of the great things that came about as part of the birthing of the International Space Station, is that it brought together former adversaries like Russia and the United States and bringing them together for the greater good. And I hope we can restore that.
Now, Russia has been an important player with the US going to space, and obviously what's going on right now in Ukraine is threatening that partnership and all what has been accomplished. Do you think that there's going to be a void that's going to be filled by China? Is China going to be perhaps the next big partner with the US?
I don't know. The concern that American political leaders and military leaders have had is that NASA is, of course, a civilian agency focused on the civilian uses of space to improve the quality of life here on Earth. The Chinese space program very clearly has strong roots in the military apparatus there in China. So I would love to bring together the best and brightest scientists and engineers from both countries to do things collaboratively in space together. But right now, as I understand it, it's been prohibited by the U.S. Congress. But I hope that we can find ways uh, to work together in space. It does allow a great platform um, to work on things that really benefit us all. The study of human physiology in space, developing technologies that allow us to go explore further, to develop medicines that benefit us all here on Earth. So I hope we can find a way to make that happen in the future.
And why would it be so important for the human species to go to space? I mean, beyond, okay, we can put satellites. A lot of people will say, okay, I get that we have benefits with the satellites, but wouldn't that be enough? Why do we need to keep pushing or even envision having an establishment on the moon and the Mars? Like, what benefit will it do to the human story and to the planet? What do you think?
It's a great question, and the short answer is the reason we go to space is it's about life here on Earth. The things that we do in space, yes, we do look out into the distance to try and understand our place in the universe, how we got here, our very origins. But really, what we're doing is pressing the boundaries of technology, of what's possible. And by inventing new technologies to sustain life aboard the International Space Station or in a lunar or Martian outpost, those are technologies and scientific discoveries that eventually wind their way back here on Earth. When I'm a physician by training, when I go into an operating room or an intensive care unit, all around me I see technologies that have their pedigree in the space program. Whether it's the miniaturization of sensors, even the Holter monitor and the heart tracings that we all now take for granted had their origins in the early space program. So when we try to do difficult things, uh, we end up with new technologies, new solutions that we can now apply back here on Earth. So these are such vital, important investments in our own future. That's why we need to keep on making these types of investments.
And life by nature is always looking to go to places. Like, the human species is the best ambassador for life. I mean, we embody the worst and the best of nature, but in reality, life is always trying to go to these little cracks or figure out how to move on to the next place. And if it can't, it's not because it doesn't want to; it's that it hasn't figured out how to get there. But once it figures out the tools, I mean, when we stood on the beach looking out on the ocean, we've always wanted to go there, just that we couldn't figure out. And once we figured out the boats, then we got onto the boats, and then we figured out how to navigate. It's like, I find it fascinating that now we're about to take life. For me, as important as when single cell became multi-cell and created a quantum leap in evolution. And now we're about to go from single planet to multi-planetary. And it will create an evolution that I think that we've seen only maybe a handful of times in our history, or in the history of life on Earth.
Yeah, well said. I think we're driven by our curiosity more than anything. That really defines humanity. And you're right. There will be a step function in evolution, literally, when we move off of the planet permanently. When we think about life on the moon with 1/6 gravity, or life on Mars 1/3 gravity, or perhaps floating in the clouds above Venus at partial gravity there, or maybe even permanently living in microgravity. These are vastly different evolutionary drivers. Do we even need a skeleton, for example, to support our structure if we're living permanently, multi generationally in weightlessness? Maybe we become blobs, um, and just a different kind of life form. Higher radiation, different sources of energy that we might use, and foods that we might consume. Yeah, it really boggles the mind when you start to think about how life would adapt and what we might become.
Do you think, as a physician, that that evolution, that biological evolution, is going to be both an evolutionary biology, but also a biotechnology, and where we're going to figure out ways to balance the two and give ourselves advantages that biology would have taken hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, but we figured out a way to accelerate the process?
I'm certain of it. I think we are at this, the singularity, we able to take advantage of a breadth of technologies and information that we've never had available to us in the past, and of course, using deep learning and other types of technologies, we can rapidly advance in so many different ways. And of course, there are investments in neuroprostheses, and maybe we all become cyborgs. Life imitates art, and so when you think about, I always get a kick out of looking at Star Trek now, and all the things that uh, they foreshadowed that have come to pass, and the future could really hold some extraordinary um, you um, accelerants, I guess. Uh,
I mean, some will even say that we're already living like all these vaccines and breakthroughs on the medicine are technology that have allowed us to actually master the chaos world of nature, where everything is at the mercy of the elements. But our success has been to create these technologies that kind of create a certain stability in where we can build on.
yes, there's certainly a degree to that, and of course, sometimes it works in our detriment. We invented nuclear weapons, of course, and now we're at a point, and I hate to jinx ourselves, but we are at a potential brink of the actual use of these terrible weapons of mass destruction. And so they can both be used for good and for evil. The thing that we've not really mastered is the ability to contain extremism. And I know that this is not a political podcast, but you have to think about those kinds of things as well. Technology can certainly be used for wonderful things, and so I'm very excited in the medical realm where I operate now. I'm medical device developer, and I work in um, human machine interfaces and electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft, and some really cool technologies that are going to revolutionize, I think, the future, to the point where perhaps in 10 years we'll have vaccines that will actually allow us to treat our own cancers, and we might even be able to wipe the notion of cancer off of the map. So that's really exciting to think about a future like that.
I think it's important as we move forward as a society is to understand that these new places that we get ourselves into will never create this sense of perfection. There's always these tensions and disruptions, and we have to admit and understand they're they will never go away. And the best that we can do is to make conscious decisions to prioritize the values and where we want to go, and give ourselves the tools to negotiate with them. It's like, teaching someone to go down a river. I mean, we'll talk about going down the Titanic and going up in Everest, but however prepared someone is for these type of experiences, it will never go according to plan. There's always some unintended consequences. It's like, having children and tell them that for the rest of their lives they're never gonna experience pain or suffering. Like, not preparing them, it's almost like a bigger disservice, because then they don't have the tools or the capacity to get out of it. So going to space, I'm always extremely careful when people say, we have to go to space and we cannot recreate the same mistakes. That is commendable. And of course, we want to do that, but we also have to expect that there's going to be unforeseen consequences and situations that we don't know. There's going to be some situations where we didn't want to be there, but we have to be prepared for ourselves. compare that to like what is it to go up on Everest and go down to the Titanic and the skills that are needed.
Right. Before I get to that, I think that was a wonderful point, and I wanted to share a great quote from someone you may have met, Story Musgrave. He's a physician astronaut. He was actually hired during the Apollo era, but flew one of the very first space shuttle missions, flew six in all, including servicing the Hubble Space Telescope that very first time. Wonderful human being and a very thoughtful mentor of mine. And one of his most famous quotes is talking about spacewalking. He was training me as a spacewalker, and he said, "You know, Scott, the only thing expected about EVA or extravehicular activity, spacewalking, is the unexpected." And what I take from that, and it applies to space flight, it applies to climbing in the Himalayas, deep sea diving, whatever type of expeditionary work you do, or running a startup company, there are always going to be unknown unknowns, things that you can't anticipate. And what it requires is confidence, a good team around you, a willingness to learn, an ability to fail and pick yourself up and solve the problem, keep going, resilience. And so, certainly, even in hopefully an idyllic future, Mars outpost, the first Mars colony there, we'll set up a civil society there that will hopefully be high functioning. But there are going to be all sorts of challenges and problems to be overcome, and the same uh, sorts of uh, mindsets will be required to get through them.
The when the time comes to um, teach young entrepreneurs about failures, we are quick to say that failure is an important process of success and discovering. In fact, there's the the only difference between a mistake and an innovation is really the result, and the journey to it is the same. It's a hindsight. One is it was a positive outcome, and then the other one was a negative outcome, but the road to it was exactly the same. That is on the business aspect, or even on the technology aspect. But also, unfortunately or fortunately, it's also the same in the cultural world and in the personal world. We need to experience or push, feel the limit of those boundaries,
Mhm.
and feel where the cracks are to realize how we want to move forward. And a lot of people right now are surprised, obviously because of what's happening in Ukraine. But a lot of people also are saying, it's like, you know what, we took certain things for granted, and we need to reinvest in the foundation of these relationships so that those kind of unfortunate incidents don't happen. And for me, it's if these boundaries were not there, we would become, I think, as a species, super arrogant and not good people. It's really the empathy and the humility that comes through these tragedies that bring ourselves together. In the same, they can divide us, but they can also bring us together.
Right.
We saw the good and the bad during COVID, but I think overall COVID will be a tremendous growth opportunity for a lot of people. I mean, transformation is inherently challenging. Like that process of going up to summit of Everest, that growth that happens is through a lot of physical and mental um, pushing.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. We do need to test ourselves. We need to understand our strengths, weaknesses, and to be able to discern between. We can talk about Everest as a model. Mountains are great metaphors for life, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but being able to discern um, in the truly physical sense between acceptable, healthy pain and injury. And so um, understanding one's limitations, understanding our impact on those around us. For me, talking about my Everest years, I spent 2 seasons on Everest. The first time I made it to Camp 3 at about 7,000 meters or 24,000 feet above sea level when I ruptured a disc in my low back. A terrible place to get injured, by the way, because there's no one that it's going to come up and haul you down. Either you're going to become an ice sculpture there, or you're going to pick yourself up, and by whatever means you got to get yourself down. No one can carry you. And so when I was there, I looked up over my shoulder to the right, and I could see the south summit of the mountain just 24 hours away. And I had spent, 8 weeks on the mountain, dreamt my whole life of taking that next day, getting to the summit of my dreams. And for a moment, I did consider, even with the excruciating pain that I had, uh, pressing forward because I really wanted more than anything in the world at that instant to summit Mount Everest. But upon further reflection, I realized that if I went any higher, not only would I'd be risking my own life, but I'd be risking the summit success of my teammates and maybe even putting them in a life or death situation because they would have done everything they could to
Yeah.
try and support me. And so at that instant, I realized that my summit bid was over and I needed to descend. And so that was really reinforcing for me, by the way, because the following year, after I'd had surgery to remove a ruptured disc in my low spine, I went back with the knowledge that I knew if I got in harm's way, if something went awry, I would make the right decision and I would put team before self and and descend. So um, I've kind of covered a lot of different aspects to your theme, but um, yeah, talking a little bit more about mountains as metaphors for life, I think it's a great metaphor for resilience as well. That is so necessary for any type of meaningful success in life. And so, there are many people that actually arrive to Everest Base Camp and realize that there are 2 vertical miles above still yet to climb, and it's the hardest part. And some people don't even set foot on the mountain from that point. They realize that it's beyond them, that they can't personally visualize the pain and suffering and the footstep by footstep uh, trajectory to get themselves to the summit. The way that I was able to measure my progress, I wasn't thinking about 2 months hence and setting boot prints on the summit. I was thinking one day at a time, one rope length at a time, sometimes even one footstep at a time. And if you can kind of parse your pathway in smaller tranches in achievable metrics, you can oftentimes um, reap greater rewards. And yeah, so sort of a long-winded answer to your question, but
No, I mean and that's a great. That's what life is about. If everybody was born knowing the the destination and everything that was in between that he needed to go through, everybody would be like, no, I don't want to go through any of this. But every day you wake up and you get a little bit further. I mean, life is one step at a time. It's not these giant leap that it's, and I've, even for me personally, every time that I've gotten myself into, in the storm and the kayak and you just, you're exhausted and you constantly just mentally go, I'm just going to get over there. I'm just going to get over there. And every time that you get over there, you're like, okay, I can make it the next time. But if you set yourself onto these giant leap, you're like, I can't, like, I don't have the strength in me to do it. And you're like, and then you go into a place that you don't want to go and you cannot afford to go as a person out in the element. Your brain goes into this survival, this binary mode of I can make it or I can't make it. I can make it, then move forward one step at a time, one step at a time, until you get over there. And then once you get over there, all the pain has almost kind of disappeared, and then you have this moment of joy.
euphoria, Right.
Oh yeah, it's that swing of physics of, like, the energy as the pain. And obviously I think we're going to get a little bit of that from COVID, because everybody's been kind of like, the pressure has been going down, 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 down for 2 years, and it's going to go back up, and there's going to be this kind of explosion of people who want to get out and want to start experiencing life again. The I was writing about how, like, even the mountain, another way that it's a metaphor for life is how, when you're young, the when you're baby, the thing that you can climb over is a little hill, and obviously that hill seems a lot to you, but it's not that big. And if you roll down the hill, consequences are not that big. But as you get better and bigger, you start to climb higher and higher, and the stakes become bigger. Obviously, if you fall off the mountain, your risk of dying, but you also develop the skills to come down better.
Right.
So people always kind of like, oh, it's getting more. No, but the skills to manage it also evolve with you. It's not just the danger increases without your capacity to go with it. Um, when you went up in space, how different was it than all your other experiences with Everest? And I mean, you've talked about how Everest, there were injuring yourself, understanding the humility of it. When you went up into space, what was for you some of the turning point that was pretty important?
Yeah, so I would find a common denominator in extreme environments, and I know you've been to many, and you've challenged yourself, to the extreme, and there are commonalities between these environments where we can go into challenging environments, like into space, like walking, floating out of the hatch into the vacuum of space to do challenging work. We can go to the tops of enormous mountains, deep beneath our oceans, inside uh, volcanic caldera. We can do these kinds of things if we're well prepared, if we understand the risks and we mitigate all those that are in our control. So, going into space, and in particular doing spacewalks, it's a daunting thing. You're relying upon an enormous amount of technology that you understand, you've trained and studied the systems in great detail, and you understand how they work, how they might fail. You have malfunction procedures that you can work through if something were to break. But ultimately, you're relying upon everyone in in the chain of custody of these spacesuits and spacecraft, that everyone's done their job to the utmost perfection, and things will work, and they won't break at the wrong time. Um, but you're also relying upon your teammates, your crewmates, your own personal training, both physical and skills based training that you need to have, and knowledge, and like I said, understanding other risks that are out there. On Everest, we can't control the occurrence of avalanches, but we can minimize our exposure to them if we try and climb through the most dangerous parts of the route during the middle of the night, so that the sun hasn't hit the slopes and loosened up the snow, such that you're at higher risk of getting swept off the mountain. You can look at the weather forecasts and try and time your ascent to that perfect weather window. Um, you can make sure that you're climbing with people that belong there, and not people that have just paid their way to be there, and don't have the climbing resume. Um, Same thing for spaceflight. NASA doesn't send people into space to do challenging things until they're technically, physically ready to do so. So there are um, a lot of commonalities between these challenging environments.
Do you remember the time that you first stepped outside of? Do you remember the emotions and that feeling of opening that door and stepping into space?
It was the most jaw-droppingly beautiful moment of my life. So we were docked to the Russian space station Mir, when it was still in orbit. This was on a mission called STS-86, and I was the lead spacewalker along with a Russian spacewalking partner, Vladimir Titov, Volodya and I. And it was the first joint U.S.-Russian spacewalk, which is pretty neat to be a part of that. And I remember opening up the hatch and a thermal cover, and I had asked the space station commander Anatoly Solovyov, as well as the shuttle crew, to turn off all the lights. I wanted to let my eyes dark accommodate so that I could see the trillions and trillions of stars out in the infinite blackness of space, and it was just overwhelmingly beautiful. Um, and so I had this jaw dropping, sense of wonder. And then, I've got to get to work here. And so I had to hook up my safety tether reel, and I floated out and I helped Volodya get out to work. Um, but then things changed very rapidly for us. So um, I had a safety tether reel, basically a steel braid cable that's your lifeline. You don't ever want to go floating away from your spaceship in space. So unfortunately, we found out after the mission, a technician had used the wrong lubricant on this retractable reel, and it wasn't retracting. So I had about 15 feet or 5 meters of steel braid cable, looping all around me. And I thought, oh crap, they're gonna, NASA's gonna call me back in. The spacewalk's over after 15 minutes, and I've dreamt my entire life for getting out here. So there was, some real nerves. My heart rate was, through the roof. And finally, after doing everything we could to try and solve this problem, wrapped it up, put it into the airlock, and I ended up using a technique not dissimilar from ice climbing. I don't know if you've ever been ice climbing, but it used two ice axes, and you always have one point of contact with the cliff or the ice fall. Well, in this case, I had a hook that I could clip onto a handrail over here, and then I'd put my next clip over here and kind of walk inchworm it by inchworm, and we got the whole spacewalk done. It was exhausting on my hands, but I had the background, a lot of training, and the determination to finish the job. So it was really rewarding to be able to finish that spacewalk and get it all done. But there was a period of terror when I thought, my spacewalking career is going to be over in 15 minutes.
I was on the panel discussion the other day talking about the explorer's mindset and managing risks, and a lot of people think that explorers often are like thrill seekers or like they love risk, and it's totally the opposite.
Right.
We what we try to do is to explore the the difference between our relationship with risk and fear. Risk are tangible, you can measure them, you can study them, you can analyze, you can train yourself with them. Fear is your interpretation of those risks with your own definition of a comfort zone, your upbringing, and when we react, it's we react according to our fears first, and then after that we train ourselves to process the risk and understanding that the big mistakes or the big danger is not dealing with our brain or not breathing. So if you can be in the moment, you can take a deep breath and you can analyze the risk, you can realize, well, this is okay. Of course there's some risk, but it's nothing different than crossing New York City on a rush hour. And it's more of a kind of a journey of growth. I think the explorers are looking for than looking for that thrill. It's really kind of it's a journey of growth.
Yeah, I agree. I think when faced with life threat or a challenging obstacle to overcome, um, yeah, I think those of us who have been in challenging environments, exploration environments, we think about okay, well, what are my assets? What are my liabilities? What am I going to do next? It's not um, you know uh, we realize that panic is not a productive, useful kind of reaction at this point. But if we can be methodical, we've overcome other challenges in the past. We've got these assets, these teammates, um, this opportunity. You can put together a plan on the fly, really quite quickly usually. And yeah, so certainly I've faced those kinds of um, unknown unknowns in a lot of different environments, both in space and in the mountains. And um, it's you know it's the price of admission, I guess. But yeah, I would agree with you that explorers, at least uh, explorers that stay in the business for a while, they're not evil Knievels, they're not risk uh, takers or daredevils. They're actually risk managers, and that's how I describe myself. I'm someone who enjoys challenging environments, but I'm a risk manager.
And talking about what's next and enjoying the extreme environments, space, Everest, you went down to Titanic, you've done several volcanoes also. And now you're telling me that you're gonna go to the Grand Canyon and do a special hike. You want to talk a little bit about it and how excited are
I'm
you?
I'm really excited about it. It's perhaps more um, uh, routine for there are probably ultra marathoners listening to this, and they probably do this hike or this run every year. But for me, going to the Grand Canyon and going from rim to rim and all the way back to the South Rim in a day or a 24-hour period is a pretty epic physical challenge as well as a mental challenge. And I just decided this past summer, I needed some sort of uh, a physical, mental challenge to take on. I'm in quite good shape usually, but this is not just a simple hike. It's I don't know, 20,000 feet of vertical and about 50 miles of pretty significant terrain, and to do it solo is always interesting as well. I know you've done a number of solo expeditions. It's a added degree of both difficulty and I think reward, because
Mhm.
you've got your little voice talking to you all the time, and perhaps second guessing yourself, and you know without someone to talk to you, perhaps you feel your own personal pain a little bit more. Um, but I just think this will be a fun thing to go try and do here in the next couple of months.
So besides the Grand Canyon, what's next for Scott this year? Are you traveling for particular events, or is there a new book coming out, or for now you're just going to focus on other projects?
Well, I have a number of things going in the entrepreneurial world, so I'm like, really excited about a lot of the technologies I'm working on. But I guess in terms of exploration, I will be going back to the Titanic this summer with a group called Ocean Gate. My friend Stockton Rush is the CEO of this company, a really talented engineer who's built uh, carbon fiber hulls for submersibles that can go 4,000 meters into the ocean, 12,600 feet beneath the surface, to where the Titanic still resides. And I was there this past summer. One of the most extraordinary adventures I've been on, quite honestly, because the technology that it requires to withstand those enormous pressures, um, and then to go to these depths and to see the biology that's there, not only the marine archaeology, which is also extraordinary. It's really like a space flight. It's that level of commitment and sophistication of technology. It's a team effort. There's a support vessel. There are marine archaeologists, marine biologists, deckhands. I'm in training as a submersible pilot, which sounds more glamorous than it really is. To drive a sub, it goes perhaps 3 knots at top speed, and you drive it with an Xbox controller. So it's really not that. It's not like flying a fighter jet or anything like that, but it is really fun. And to be down there, and also to realize the magnitude of what the Titanic was. It was sort of the moonshot of its era. The cutting edge of technology, the unsinkable ship that, of course, was very sinkable and fallible, just like our spacecraft today are.
Yep.
It's we can never let our guard down. Um, but it's sobering to be there in that environment, knowing so many souls did pass, but it's still there as both a memorial, but also as a laboratory for us to learn about marine structures and also uh, the adaptability of life. There are life forms there that actually have bacteria that have adapted to the iron oxide, the rust in the bow of the ship. They create these beautiful rusticles. They're like stalactites in a cave, but they grow off of the bow of the ship, and so it's really uh, a, a life changing experience, I'd have to say.
So you're gonna go back this summer. How long does it take to go all the way down?
So it takes about a day and a half out of St. John's sailing, right off of the continental shelf to the southeast of St. John, Newfoundland, and then once you have ingressed the submersible and been lowered into the water, it takes about 2.5 hours to descend the 12,500 feet or 4,000 meters, and you'll spend anywhere from an hour to perhaps 3 or 4 hours on the wreck itself, and then another 2.5 hours to ascend. So it's a full day.
Wow. Obviously, it's not for the ones that feel claustrophobic and to
Claustrophobic, right? Yeah, you wouldn't like it.
and just on a curious side, what happens if is there a way to relieve yourself if some like if you need to go?
My wife will kill me when I tell you this story, but she actually earned a merit badge on the dive that we took. So she was the very first person to christen the uh, Titan's waste containment system.
No
So
way.
there's a small little potty that is available on the submersible. I would say it's a 5-person sub, and it's about the size internal volume of an SUV. So it's quite spacious and great external HD cameras and things like that, and then a beautiful porthole up in the front. So plenty of room to stretch out and some privacy if you do need to use the facilities.
It's all these little things that we take for granted. And that, like, when I look at the science fiction movie, and I'm like, where's the toilet in the spaceship? Like, they travel in this tiny little thing. It's just a cockpit, and then they travel between light years. And you go, well, hold on. You need to live. You need to go to the bathroom. You need to eat. You need to sleep. And where are you doing that? There, it's it's
You're
all
thinking too much. You're thinking
yeah.
too
I know it's really hard to watch like movies today. Like even just the physics of superheroes. Like when someone falls a building and this Superman flies down and just rescues someone just by grabbing them by the arm, and you go, no, the arm would disconnect and rip, and the momentum. I'm like that. People are like, Daniel, can you suck? Can you just enjoy the movie? I'm like, no, but it can. So, Scott, people can find your book on Amazon, and
much. As well. Mhm.
we'll put your website in the comments and in the link. They can reach out through your website. They can follow you on Instagram when you go to because you travel, and I know that you post where you go. So that if they want to catch up with you, they can do so. You're a really approachable person. I invite people to connect with you. Is there any words of wisdom you would like to share with the audience before we go?
Yeah, yes. Just in terms of social media, my handle is AstroDoc Scott. So if you want to look for that, yeah, I want to leave people with an uplift. It's so easy to be dragged down with the news, the nightly news, and of course we've all lived through 2 years of horrible pandemic, and many of us have lost family or friends. and now we're at the beginnings of a very serious conflict in Europe. Um, but also have to think that there's reason for optimism. So many wonderful things are happening in our increasingly technological world. And of course, we're here to talk about space, but thinking about the gateways to space have really started to open up. We're going to be starting to fly dozens, if not hundreds, of people a year into space, and the life changing experience that will imbue in them, and how they'll be ambassadors and be able to bring back lessons and positivity from that. That the advances that we're seeing in medicine and healthcare are really staggering, and so I think we have certainly many problems that we still need to solve, but we have the uh, greater technologies and greater um, smarts and AI to apply to more daunting challenges that we face. So I believe that there's still a very bright future out in front of us, and so that's what I'd want to leave with everybody.
I totally agree with you, Scott. I mean, this is, we hear of the negative reality all the time because that's newsworthy. We don't hear about all the good stuff. And
Right.
ultimately, the reason why we're soon to be 8 billion and still functioning in some ways, yes, with challenges, is because there's a lot more positive than negative
Mhm.
happening. It's just unfortunate that people have learn or have come to the conclusion that we're bad species. But I think that the beauty of the human species is that we rise in those moments. I think that some of the best aspect of humanity is in those tragedies, as unfortunate as they are, they force they make us come together and really celebrate this uniqueness that we have as a kind. So
Very
without
much.
any without, it's going to be challenging, but for me, I find the future is really promising and is going to unveil so many amazing discoveries that I can't wait to be part of it. So,
Let's
Scott,
make it so. You bet.
absolutely, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I look forward. You and I were due to a little hike in the back country together. So
Let's do it.
I'm
Be great.
looking forward.
Right on.
All right, bye, Scott.